What happens when a man's carefully constructed lie, a performance that earned him the sympathy of a nation, shatters in the most public way imaginable? For 6 months, Issac Hayes was the grieving husband, his story of abandonment plastered across tabloids. He was the victim, his wife Caily, the villain who vanished without a trace. In a silent courtroom, he was moments away from claiming everything she owned. But the sound of a heavy oak door swinging open changed everything. A single footstep, then another, heralded the arrival of a truth so explosive it would not only destroy his reputation, but expose a web of deceit, abuse, and breathtaking greed that no one saw coming. The air in courtroom 4B of the St. Albans County Courthouse was thick with a cloying mix of aged wood polish, cheap coffee, and manufactured sympathy. It was a sympathy that Issac Hayes had cultivated with the skill of a master gardener. For the past 90 minutes he had sat at the plaintiff's table, a portrait of dignified grief. His shoulders, broad from his college football days, were stooped in a convincing slump. His jaw, usually set with a cocky self-assurance, was slack with feigned despair. He dabbed a dry eye with a crisp white handkerchief, a gesture he had practiced in front of his bathroom mirror. It had to be perfect, not too dramatic, just a subtle, weary motion of a man pushed to his absolute limit. Mr. Hayes, his lawyer, a formidable woman named Brenda Sharp, began, her voice resonating with practiced empathy. "Could you please recount for the court one more time the events of January 12th of this year?" Issac took a shaky breath. "She was just gone," he said, his voice cracking on cue. He looked towards Judge Marianne Thompson, a woman known for her no-nonsense demeanor, but who, like the rest of the room, seemed to be leaning in, caught in his narrative web. "I came home from my studio. I'd had a good day, a breakthrough on a new sculpture. I was excited to tell her. I'd even bought her favorite takeout, that spicy Thai food from the place on Elm." He paused, letting the domestic detail land. It was these small, relatable touches that made his story so potent. But the house was dark. Silent, he continued. Her car was gone. Her suitcase, the vintage one she loved, was missing. Her closet. It was half empty. She'd taken her most expensive clothes, her jewelry. No note, no text message, no call, nothing in 6 months. Brenda Sharp let the silence hang in the air before she walked towards the judge's bench. "Your Honor, for 6 agonizing months my client has lived in a state of purgatory. He has filed missing person reports. He has cooperated with every police inquiry. He has called her family, her friends, none of whom it seems were privy to her cruel intentions. He is a man who gave his wife everything: a beautiful home, financial security, his unwavering love and support for her endeavors." The subtle condescension in the word endeavors, referring to Caily's fledgling graphic design business, was a calculated barb. It painted her as flighty, ungrateful, a woman who dabbled in hobbies while her devoted husband toiled away. Issac's toil was as a sculptor, a profession that sounded romantic and earnest. He'd had a few minor gallery showings years ago, but his primary source of income was a trust fund from his late grandmother. He conveniently omitted this fact, preferring the image of the struggling artist. The house, the cars, the lifestyle, it was all funded by his money, or so the narrative went. In reality, Caily's inheritance from her father had paid off the mortgage and funded their first few years of marriage, a fact Issac's legal filings cleverly obscured through a complex narrative of commingled assets. "He has been forced to put his life, his career on hold," Brenda continued, her voice rising with indignation. "He has suffered immense emotional distress and public humiliation. And now he comes before this court, seeking what any reasonable person would: a dissolution of the marriage on the grounds of willful abandonment, and a default judgment to assume sole ownership of the marital assets, which by her desertion she has clearly forfeited." Judge Thompson peered over her glasses, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Hayes, you've stated you have had 0 contact. No emails, no social media activity, nothing that would indicate her whereabouts or her state of mind." "Nothing, Your Honor." Issac said, shaking his head slowly. It's like she became a ghost who took her passport and all our liquid savings. He added the last part with a touch of bitterness, the final nail in Caily's coffin. He was the stable provider. She was the reckless thief. The courtroom was still. The gallery filled with a few curious local reporters who had followed the vanished wife story scribbled in their notepads. It was a slam dunk. The evidence of her departure was clear. The lack of contact was undisputed. Issac's performance was flawless. He was minutes away from victory, from possessing the house, the remaining investments, and the freedom to live his life without the inconvenient presence of a wife who had started to see through his charming facade. Brenda Sharp smiled, a thin, triumphant curl of her lips. "The plaintiff rests, Your Honor." Judge Thompson looked around the empty space next to the defendant's table. As the defendant, Ms. Caily Hayes Reed, has not appeared, nor has she responded to any summons. The judge's voice was suddenly cut off by a deep, resonant groan as the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom swung inward. Every head turned. The collective gasp was audible, a sharp intake of breath that sucked the curated sympathy right out of the room. Standing in the doorway, framed by the bright light of the hallway, was a woman. Her honey blonde hair was longer than in the pictures Issac had provided, the media cascading over her shoulders. Her face, though pale and strained, was unmistakably the one from the wedding photos displayed on the evidence table. It was Caily. But it wasn't just Caily. Her presence alone would have been a shock. It was the way she stood. One hand rested protectively on the pronounced, unmistakable swell of a heavily pregnant belly. Time seemed to freeze. The reporters' pens hovered over their notepads. Brenda Sharp's triumphant smile dissolved into a mask of slack-jawed disbelief. Judge Thompson's glasses slipped down her nose. Issac's reaction was the most telling. The mask of the grieving husband didn't just slip. It shattered. His face, which moments before had been a canvas of sorrow, turned a ghastly shade of white. His eyes, which had so convincingly feigned tears, now bulged with a mixture of pure undiluted rage and ice-cold panic. The carefully constructed world of Issac Hayes, his masterpiece of deceit, had just been demolished by the silent, powerful testimony of his wife's return. Then a second figure stepped out from behind her, moving to her side. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke navy suit that whispered rather than shouted wealth. His dark hair was threaded with a touch of silver at the temples, and his face was etched with a quiet, steely authority. He placed a gentle, proprietary hand on the small of Caily's back. Anyone with a passing knowledge of global finance or high society would have recognized him instantly. He was Julian Devereaux, the Julian Devereaux, a reclusive, media-shy billionaire whose net worth was a subject of speculative fascination for Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. The courtroom didn't just freeze. It broke. The silence was shattered by a cacophony of frantic whispers, the clicking of phone cameras, and a strangled sound from the plaintiff's table that could only be described as the death rattle of a perfect lie. The chaos was immediate. The bailiff, a burly man named Gus, shouted, "Order, order in the court!" But his voice was drowned out by the rising tide of murmurs and the frantic energy that now gripped the room. Reporters were already half out of their seats, their professional neutrality incinerated by the sheer voltage of the unfolding drama. "Ms. Sharp," Judge Thompson's voice boomed, cutting through the noise with the sharp crack of a gavel. "Get a handle on your client." Brenda Sharp was already at Issac's side, her hand on his arm. He was shaking not with fear, but with a volcanic fury. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the table. "What is this? What the hell is this?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. The grieving husband replaced entirely by a cornered animal. "She can't just walk in here. Not like that." His eyes were locked on Caily's belly. It was a physical manifestation of a betrayal he couldn't yet comprehend, but knew instinctively had ruined him. At the defendant's table, a space that had been symbolic of absence just moments before a new team was assembling with quiet efficiency. A man in a conservative gray suit who had entered behind Julian Devereaux stepped forward. "Your Honor," he said, his voice calm and clear, a steady beacon in the storm. "My name is Marcus Davies of the firm Davies, Chen and Associates. I am representing Caily Hayes, who is, as you can see, present and accounted for." Judge Thompson, her face a thunderous mask of judicial outrage at being so thoroughly misled, slammed her gavel again. "This court is in recess, 10 minutes. Counsel will meet me in my chambers. Now." She fixed Issac with a glare so potent it seemed to scorch the air. "Mr. Hayes, you will remain here, and you will remain silent." As the judge swept from the room, Caily finally moved. She allowed Julian Devereaux to guide her to the defendant's table, her steps slow and deliberate. She did not look at Issac. Her focus was inward, a fortress of calm she had built around herself and her unborn child. The journey to this courtroom had been a marathon of anxiety, and she was conserving every ounce of her strength for the battle to come. Julian pulled out a chair for her, his movements fluid and protective. He leaned down, his voice a low murmur meant only for her. "You were magnificent, Caily. Just breathe. Marcus has this." She gave him a small, grateful nod, her hand never leaving her stomach. Across the aisle, the facade was crumbling completely. "Did you see him?" Issac spat at Brenda. "Devereaux, Julian goddamn Devereaux. What is she doing with him? She's a gold digger. That's what this is. She ran off, got herself knocked up by some billionaire, and now she's come back to laugh in my face." Brenda, sharp though blindsided, was a professional. Her mind was already racing, trying to salvage the situation. The abandonment claim was not just dead, it was a public joke. Her client, who had been the picture of sympathy, now looked like a fool at best and a liar at worst. "Shut up, Issac," she ordered, her voice sharp. "Do not say another word. You have no idea what's happening, and your speculation is making it worse. We need to pivot. Adultery. This is a clear case of adultery." "Of course it's adultery," he seethed. But even as he said it, a cold dread began to seep into his anger. The dates. He started doing the math. For the baby to be that developed, she would have had to get pregnant. When February-March, he had claimed she vanished in mid-January. The timeline was tight, but Brenda could make it work. She could argue the affair started before she left. Yes, that was it. She left him for Devereaux. It was a story. It wasn't as good as the abandonment story, but it was something. Inside Judge Thompson's chambers, the atmosphere was arctic. "Mr. Davies," the judge began, her voice dangerously low, "you have a great deal of explaining to do. Your client has been the subject of a 6-month search. Mr. Hayes has filed court documents attesting to his complete and total ignorance of her whereabouts. And you show up on the day of the default judgment with her pregnant. Care to illuminate me?" Marcus Davies was unruffled. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the only person who needs to explain anything is Mr. Hayes. My client, Ms. Hayes, did not abandon her marriage. She fled it." Brenda Sharp scoffed. "Oh, please. Fled. That's a very dramatic word for ran off with a billionaire. She fled a situation of escalating emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and coercive control." Davies countered, his gaze unwavering. "She left with nothing but a single suitcase and the clothes on her back because she was terrified. The only reason she didn't file for divorce immediately was due to a well-founded fear of her husband's retaliatory and vindictive nature, a nature I believe he is currently displaying in your courtroom." He slid a slim folder across the judge's polished desk. "These are copies of emails and text messages from Mr. Hayes to my client in the year leading up to her departure. You will note the pattern of belittling comments regarding her career, the demands for access to her personal accounts, and the threats to ruin her if she ever embarrassed him." Judge Thompson opened the folder, her eyes scanning the first page. Brenda tried to interject. "Your Honor, a few heated marital arguments do not constitute abuse. And this doesn't change the fact that she is clearly pregnant with another man's child. My client's relationship with Mr. Devereaux began in late February of this year, approximately 5 weeks after she was forced to leave her home," Davies stated calmly. "The pregnancy, while a private matter, is a result of that new relationship. A relationship that only exists because the one with Mr. Hayes was irrevocably broken by his own actions. "This is absurd," Brenda said, shaking her head. She fled in fear and fell into the arms of one of the world's richest men. "The optics are terrible, Mr. Davies." "The optics of my client's new life are irrelevant," Davies retorted. "The facts of her old one are what matter. The fact is, Mr. Hayes's entire petition to this court is based on a fraudulent narrative. He didn't come home to a mysteriously empty house. He came home to a house his wife had been forced to escape. He didn't file a missing persons report out of concern. He did it as a calculated legal strategy to paint himself as the victim and seize their shared assets. He has committed perjury, Your Honor. His entire case is a house of cards built on a foundation of lies." Judge Thompson looked up from the folder, her expression grim. The few emails she had read were damning, filled with a chilling, controlling rage that was a world away from the grieving husband persona. "Ms. Sharp," the judge said, her voice like chipping ice, "given these developments, I am vacating today's proceedings. I am ordering both parties to enter into discovery immediately. A new hearing is scheduled for 4 weeks from today, and I am issuing a temporary restraining order against your client, Mr. Hayes. He is to have no contact with Ms. Hayes. None." She paused, looking directly at Brenda. "And I would advise you to have a very, very frank conversation with your client about the penalties for misleading this court. This is no longer a simple divorce hearing. This has become something much more serious." As Marcus Davies left the chambers, he felt a small sense of victory, but he knew the real war was just beginning. Brenda Sharp was a shark, and she would tear into Caily's past and her relationship with Julian with a vengeance. When he returned to the courtroom, he saw Caily sitting quietly, Julian standing sentinel behind her. Issac was on the other side, his face a mask of purple rage, whispering furiously to his lawyer. As their eyes met across the courtroom, Issac's gaze was no longer that of a performer. It was the look of a man who had been publicly dethroned, and in his eyes Caily saw a promise of brutal, merciless revenge. The lie was dead, but the monster it had hidden was now awake. The days following the courtroom bombshell were a whirlwind of legal maneuvers and tabloid frenzy. The story was irresistible. The vanished wife, the grieving husband, the surprise pregnancy, and the billionaire savior. Paparazzi camped outside the gates of Julian Devereaux's sprawling estate on the coast, a modern fortress of glass and stone, nestled into the cliffs overlooking the Pacific. It was here, within these walls of quiet luxury, that Caily had found sanctuary. The estate, known as Airy, was more than a home. It was a testament to Julian's character. It was minimalist, yet warm, secure, yet open to the vast expanse of the ocean. It was everything her marital home with Issac had not been. The house they had shared, a charming but claustrophobic suburban Tudor, had become a prison of Issac's moods and expectations. Every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall had been subject to his approval. He called it curating their life, but Caily came to understand it as curating her. One evening a week after the court appearance, Caily stood on a balcony overlooking the churning sea, the salty air cool against her face. Julian came out to join her, wrapping a soft cashmere blanket around her shoulders. "Marcus called," he said gently. "Sharp has filed a motion to compel a paternity test and has subpoenaed your financial records from the last 5 years. Caily sighed, leaning back against him. "Of course she has. She wants to prove I was a gold digger from the start, that I planned all this." "Let her try," Julian said, his voice a low rumble of confidence. "There's nothing to find. But are you prepared for what this means? They will dissect every aspect of your life with Issac. They will twist every argument, every withdrawal you ever made." "I know," she said softly. "But I'm not the same person who left that house, Julian. I'm not afraid of him anymore." But as she said it, a memory sharp and unwelcome pierced through her newfound resolve. Flashback. 9 months ago, the kitchen of their home. Caily was sketching at the kitchen island a new logo concept for a local bakery. She was excited, feeling the creative spark that Issac had so expertly dampened over the years. He walked in home early from his studio, a rented space where he spent more time drinking with other artists than sculpting. He glanced over her shoulder. "What's this?" "It's for the Buttercup Bakery," she said, a hopeful smile on her face. "They saw my portfolio online and commissioned me." Issac picked up her stylus, turning it over in his fingers. "Buttercup Bakery," he scoffed. "How quaint. How much are they paying you for this little doodle? A few $100s? $500. She said, her voice smaller now. "It's a start." "It's a distraction, Caily," he said, his tone shifting from dismissive to controlling. "Your focus should be here. On us. On our home. I'm on the verge of a major commission, a public installation. I need your support, not for you to be wasting time on pastry logos." There was no major commission. There never was. It was a phantom he dangled to maintain his position as the serious, important artist in the relationship. "It's not a waste of time, Issac," she argued, her frustration bubbling up. "It's my work, my career, and we need the money. You know we do." His eyes went cold. It was a look she had come to dread. The charm vanished, replaced by something hard and ugly. "What did you just say?" "I said we need the money," she repeated, her courage faltering. "The credit card bills are—" He slammed his hand down on the marble island. The bang echoed in the small kitchen, making her jump. "Don't you ever accuse me of not providing for us," he snarled, his face close to hers. "I give you this beautiful life, this house, and you have the audacity to whine about bills. The only reason we have money problems is because of your frivolous spending." It was a lie so blatant it was breathtaking. She barely spent anything on herself. The mounting debt was from him, expensive tools he never used, bar tabs he ran up networking, impulsive online purchases. He had even, she would later discover, taken out loans in her name, forging her signature with a skill that bespoke practice. "That's not true," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "It is true," he roared, sweeping her sketchbook and laptop off the island. They crashed to the floor, the screen of her laptop cracking. "Your little hobby is costing us a fortune. Now clean this up. I'm going out. I need to get away from this negativity." He stormed out, leaving her standing amidst the wreckage of her work and her confidence. She sank to the floor, hot tears of shame and rage streaming down her face. It wasn't the first time he had exploded like that, but it was the first time he had destroyed something she had created. It was a turning point. She realized he didn't just want to control her, he wanted to erase her. "Ah, Caily." Julian's voice pulled her back to the present, to the safe balcony overlooking the sea. He turned her around to face him, his eyes searching hers with concern. "You're 1,000,000 miles away." She took a shaky breath. "I was just remembering why I had to leave." She looked at him, her eyes clear with a painful honesty. "You know, the hardest part wasn't leaving him. It was admitting to myself that the man I married was a fiction. The real Issac was the man I ran from, the man in that courtroom." "He never deserved you," Julian said simply. The story of how Caily and Julian had met was something Brenda Sharp's investigators were desperately trying to unearth, hoping to find the seeds of an affair. The truth was far less scandalous and far more poignant. Caily's best friend, a sharp-witted art gallery curator named Chloe, had orchestrated her escape. It was Chloe who had booked the secret flight, Chloe who had helped her pack one bag in a frantic 20-minute window while Issac was out. Caily had fled to a small, anonymous town 1,000 miles away, renting a room under her maiden name, Reed. She had arrived with less than $1,000 and a shattered sense of self. To survive, she started doing freelance graphic design work online, hiding her identity, slowly rebuilding. One of her clients, through a third-party platform, was a new environmental foundation. Her work was clean, powerful, and deeply insightful. The foundation's director was so impressed that she requested a video conference to discuss a long-term contract. The director was Julian Devereaux. When his face appeared on her screen, Caily almost ended the call. She knew who he was, of course. She also knew that his family and her family had been acquainted generations ago, a forgotten link between old East Coast money. He had recognized her name Reed and had made the connection. Caily Reed, he'd said, a gentle curiosity in his voice. Any relation to the late George Reed of Boston? He was my father, she had replied, stunned. From there, the professional relationship had blossomed into a careful friendship. He was a widower, his wife having passed away years ago, and he carried a quiet sadness that resonated with her own. He never pried into her personal life, but he created a space where she felt safe enough to share. He listened, truly listened, as she haltingly told him her story. He didn't see a victim or a runaway. He saw a survivor. He saw the brilliant, talented woman who had been buried under years of Issac's abuse. He offered her a full-time position as the creative director for his foundation, but more than that, he offered her his respect. Friendship slowly, naturally deepened into love. It was a love built not on a dramatic rescue, but on the quiet ground of mutual healing and admiration. The pregnancy had been a surprise, but a joyful one, a symbol of a future she never thought she'd have. Now that future was under attack. Marcus Davies' strategy was twofold. First, prove Issac's abuse and financial fraud to neutralize any claims he had on Caily's future or Julian's assets. Second, countersue for damages. We have the text messages, Marcus explained during a strategy meeting in Julian's vast library. We have Chloe's testimony about the state Caily was in when she fled. But what we need is a smoking gun, something that proves the financial fraud beyond any doubt. Caily's mind went back to the arguments, the constant stress about money that Issac always turned back on her. He kept his finances so secret, she said, frustrated. Everything was online, password protected. He had a separate office in the house that was always locked. The sanctum sanctorum, Julian murmured, recalling a detail from Caily's stories. Exactly, Caily said. He spent hours in there. He would say he was managing his portfolio. A portfolio that was hemorrhaging money according to our forensic accountant, Marcus said, tapping a pen on a thick binder. The man was a disastrous day trader, and worse, when his own trust fund started running low, he began using your assets as collateral. He forged your signature on at least 2 loan applications totaling over $200,000. I never saw any of that money, Caily whispered, horrified. Of course not, Marcus said grimly. It went straight into his trading account and was lost within months. His claim of abandonment wasn't just about getting the house Caily. It was about making you the vanished wife responsible for the mountain of debt he'd secretly created. If he won that default judgment, the creditors would have come after you, not him. The sheer cold-blooded cruelty of it settled over her. He hadn't just wanted to get rid of her. He had planned to utterly ruin her, to saddle her ghost with his failures. The locked office, Julian said suddenly, his eyes sharp. Did he have a computer in there? Yes, a desktop, Caily confirmed. And a shredder. She thought for a moment. Yes, a big one. It was always running. Julian looked at Marcus. He wouldn't have been stupid enough to leave a paper trail, but the digital one. People like Issac Hayes, narcissists, they believe they're too clever to be caught. They get sloppy. We need access to that house, Marcus said. We need that hard drive. Brenda Sharp will never agree to it, Caily said. Then we'll get a court order, Julian replied, his voice firm. We're done playing defense. It's time to go on the attack. The battle line was drawn. It wasn't just about a divorce anymore. It was about exposing a predator and reclaiming a life he had tried to steal and destroy. Getting a court order to search the marital home was a stroke of strategic genius by Marcus Davies. He didn't frame it as a search for evidence of abuse. Instead, he argued that since the division of assets was now contested, a full and impartial inventory of the home's contents, including digital assets, was required. Brenda Sharp fought it, calling it a fishing expedition. But Judge Thompson, her patience with Issac clearly worn thin, granted the motion. A court-appointed receiver would oversee the process, with digital forensic experts from both sides present. Issac was livid. The house was his stage, the carefully curated backdrop for his fictional life. The idea of Caily's legal team swarming through it, touching his things, felt like a profound violation. More importantly, he was terrified of what they might find on the desktop computer in his locked office. He spent 2 frantic days before the search cleaning up. He shredded every document he could find. He ran military-grade deletion software on his hard drive, overwriting the free space multiple times. He was confident that whatever sins were stored on that computer were now digital dust. He left the machine in place, believing a missing computer would be more suspicious than a wiped one. He believed, outsmarted them again. The day of the search was tense. Caily chose not to go. The thought of returning to that house too painful. Julian stayed with her at Erie, a silent, supportive presence. Marcus Davies led the charge, accompanied by a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, a digital forensics expert with a reputation for being able to recover data from the digital equivalent of a nuclear blast. Brenda Sharp and Issac stood in the living room, arms crossed, watching the proceedings with unconcealed hostility. "This is a complete waste of time and taxpayer money," Issac grumbled to Brenda loud enough for everyone to hear. "They'll find nothing." Dr. Thorne and her team went straight for the office. They carefully bagged the desktop tower, handling it like a priceless artifact. They took the shredder too, sealing the bag of confetti-like paper strips. "Taking the trash now, are we?" Issac sneered at Marcus. Marcus just smiled politely. "Thoroughness is key, Mr. Hayes." Back in Dr. Thorne's sterile lab, the real work began. As Issac had predicted, the hard drive was a wasteland. The surface-level data was gone, overwritten with junk code. "He did a professional job, I'll give him that," Dr. Thorne said to Marcus a day later, her eyes fixed on a complex array of monitors. "He used a 7-pass algorithm. Most amateurs wouldn't know how to do that." "So it's a dead end?" Marcus asked, his heart sinking. "A dead end is a wall," Dr. Thorne replied, a glint in her eye. "I prefer to think of this as a very, very deep hole, and I brought my shovel." She pointed to a sliver of code on her screen. "He wiped the primary drive, but he wasn't smart enough to wipe the recovery partition or check the system's shadow copies, and he made one colossal egotistical mistake." She swiveled in her chair to face him. He was so confident in his deletion software that he didn't bother to clear his cloud backup sync logs. Marcus leaned in, intrigued. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, typing furiously, "that while the files themselves are gone from this physical drive, the computer kept a hidden record of everything that was automatically backed up to his private cloud storage service. It's like having a detailed shipping manifest of a boat that's been scuttled. We may not have the boat, but we know exactly what cargo was on board. And better yet," she paused dramatically, "we have the delivery address." And the delivery address was a cloud service called Aegis Vault. It was an obscure, expensive service known for its claims of unbreachable privacy, popular with people who had things to hide. With a new subpoena powered by the evidence from the sync logs, they gained court-ordered access. When the contents of Aegis Vault were decrypted and opened, it was not a smoking gun. It was an arsenal. It contained everything. Scanned copies of the forged loan applications. Spreadsheets meticulously tracking his secret debts. A detailed journal written with chilling detachment outlining his plan to manage the Caily problem by engineering her departure and pinning the debt on her. He had written about provoking fights systematically, destroying her confidence, and isolating her from her friends, all under the heading Project Ghost. But there was more. The most damning discovery was a folder of audio files. Issac, a man obsessed with controlling the narrative, had secretly recorded many of his arguments with Caily. He had likely intended to edit them to splice together clips that would paint her as hysterical and unstable if he ever needed to. But in his arrogance, he had saved the raw, unedited files. Files that captured his voice full of rage screaming at her. files that recorded her sobbing, pleading with him to stop. Files that captured the sound of her laptop crashing to the floor. It was the entire ugly tapestry of his abuse recorded by his own hand. And then there was the final twist. A subfolder titled Contingency. Inside was a single password-protected document. Dr. Thorne's team worked on it for hours before finally cracking it. It contained a draft of a letter, a fake suicide note. It was written from Caily's perspective. It spoke of her shame over her failures and her inability to cope. It was dated January 14th, 2 days after she vanished. Marcus Davies felt a wave of nausea as he read it. Issac hadn't just planned to ruin her financially. He had a contingency plan to posthumously destroy her reputation if her disappearance ever became a real problem. He hadn't just wanted her gone. He had in some dark corner of his mind contemplated erasing her completely. When Marcus presented the findings to Caily and Julian, the room was heavy with a solemn silence. Caily read the fake suicide note, her face pale, her hand trembling. She wasn't crying. Her shock was too deep for tears. It was the ultimate violation, an attempt to steal her voice, her truth, even her death. Julian read it over her shoulder, and his face, usually so composed, hardened into granite. The quiet, supportive billionaire vanished, replaced by a man of formidable, ice-cold fury. "Marcus," Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I believe you mentioned countersuing for damages." "Yes," Marcus replied, his own voice tight with anger. "For emotional distress, for fraud." "That's no longer sufficient," Julian interrupted. "This isn't about money, this is about justice. We're going to the district attorney. We have evidence of wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy. But more than that, we are going to dismantle Issac Hayes. We will use every resource at our disposal. We will fund a private investigation into every corner of his life. We will find every person he has ever cheated or lied to. Brenda Sharp thinks this is a divorce case. We are going to show her it's a criminal trial in the making." He looked at Caily, his eyes softening for a moment. "He tried to turn you into a ghost, Caily. We're going to make him wish he could disappear." The discovery phase was over. The war was about to begin. Issac Hayes, so confident in his digital housekeeping, had no idea that his own Trojan horse of a computer had just delivered a conquering army to the gates of his ruined kingdom. The 4 weeks between the discovery and the new hearing were a blur of strategic activity for Caily's team and a spiral of panicked denial for Issac's. Marcus Davies formally shared the evidence from the Aegis vault with Brenda Sharp, a legal obligation that he fulfilled with grim satisfaction. The effect was immediate. Brenda's next communication was starkly different. The aggressive, confident tone was gone, replaced by a cautious, almost desperate proposal for a settlement. She offered Caily the house, a reversal of all financial claims, and a modest sum for emotional distress, provided Caily signed an ironclad non-disclosure agreement. Julian Devereaux's response, channeled through Marcus, was swift and brutal. Rejection. All of it. "We are not interested in a settlement. We are interested in a public hearing. We have also forwarded our findings to the district attorney's office. Tell your client we'll see him in court." Brenda knew what this meant. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about damage control. Her client wasn't just facing a divorce. He was facing potential incarceration. Her professional duty required her to mount a defense, but she was now defending a man she knew to be a liar, a fraud, and a monster. The day of the hearing arrived. Courtroom 4B was no longer a sleepy venue for local disputes. It was packed. The story had exploded. Reporters from national news outlets lined the benches. The public gallery was overflowing. This was the final act of a drama that had captivated the public imagination. Issac arrived looking haggard. The cocky self-assurance was gone, replaced by a pallid, hunted look. He had lost weight, and his expensive suit seemed to hang off his frame. He avoided looking at the gallery, his eyes darting around nervously. Caily entered moments later, and a hush fell over the room. She was no longer the frightened apparition who had appeared in the doorway a month ago. She walked with a calm, deliberate grace, her pregnancy now a source of visible strength. Julian was by her side, not as a savior, but as a partner. They were a united front radiating a quiet power that made Issac shrink in his chair. Judge Thompson entered, her face stern. "This court is now in session. Mr. Davies, you may begin." "Thank you, Your Honor." Marcus began, rising to his feet. Over the past month, through a court-ordered discovery process, a number of disturbing facts have come to light. Facts that not only refute Mr. Hayes' original petition, but paint a picture of calculated cruelty and criminal fraud that is frankly shocking to the conscience. For the next hour, Marcus methodically laid out the case. He presented the forged loan documents. He had the forensic accountant testify about the secret debts and the disastrous trading losses. He submitted the text messages, the emails, and the chilling contents of Issac's journal, Project Ghost. Then he turned to the audio files. "Your Honor, we have audio evidence that we believe conclusively demonstrates the abusive environment my client was forced to endure. With the court's permission, I would like to play a short selection." Brenda Sharp shot to her feet. "Objection. This is prejudicial. These are out-of-context marital squabbles illegally recorded." "Your client made the recordings, Ms. Sharp," Judge Thompson said dryly. "And as they were discovered on a shared marital asset pursuant to a court order, they are admissible. Objection overruled. Proceed, Mr. Davies." Marcus clicked a button on his laptop. The sound of Issac's voice filled the silent courtroom. It was not the soft, grieving voice they had heard before. It was a snarling, vicious roar. "Don't you ever accuse me of not providing for us. I give you this beautiful life, this house, and you have the audacity to whine about bills." A sharp bang echoed from the speakers. Several people in the gallery flinched. Then Caily's voice, small and trembling. "That's not true." "It is true." Issac's recorded voice roared. There was a loud crash. "Your little hobby is costing us a fortune. Now clean this up." Marcus stopped the recording. The effect was devastating. Hearing the raw, brutal reality of his abuse in his own voice stripped away any last shred of sympathy anyone might have had for Issac Hayes. He sat ashen-faced, staring at the table. But Marcus wasn't done. "Finally, Your Honor, we have the matter of what Mr. Hayes labeled his contingency plan." He projected the fake suicide note onto the large screen meant for evidence display. "A fraudulent document written by Mr. Hayes in my client's voice to be deployed in the event her disappearance required further explanation. An attempt to not only cover his tracks, but to commit the ultimate act of character assassination." The room was utterly still. The words on the screen were a testament to a chilling sociopathic level of premeditation. Judge Thompson read the note, her face growing visibly darker with every word. She took off her glasses and looked at Issac. It was a look of pure contempt. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice dangerously calm, "do you have anything to say in response to this evidence?" It was here that Issac Hayes made his final fatal error. Cornered, humiliated, and stripped of all his lies, his carefully constructed persona cracked, and the raging narcissist underneath erupted. He shot to his feet, ignoring Brenda Sharp's desperate hiss to sit down. "She drove me to it," he screamed, his voice raw with a victimhood he truly believed in. He pointed a trembling finger at Caily. "She did this. She was never happy. Nothing was ever good enough for her. The passive-aggressive comments, the constant disappointment, she was sucking the life out of me." He turned his mad gaze on Julian. "And then she finds him. She leaves me with nothing but a note." "There was no note, Issac," Marcus interjected calmly. "There was no note because she was too cowardly to write one," he raged. "She runs off with this vulture. Look at her glowing. She was never that happy with me. She cheated on me. She lied. She plotted this from the start to take my money and humiliate me. Mr. Hayes." Judge Thompson warned, her voice like steel. "No." he shrieked, his composure completely gone. "This is my life, my house, my reputation. She ruined me. That baby probably isn't even his. It could be anyone's. She's a whore and a gold digger." The ugly words hung in the air. Caily flinched, and Julian put a protective arm around her, his eyes fixed on Issac with a look of cold, hard pity. Issac had done what Marcus Davies and Julian Devereaux, with all their resources, could not. He had confessed. Not to the fraud, but to the motive behind it all, his pathologically insecure ego. He couldn't stand the idea of her being happy without him. He couldn't stand being seen as anything less than the hero of his own story. In his frantic attempt to reclaim that narrative, he had shown everyone the monster he truly was. Judge Thompson slammed her gavel down the sound like a gunshot. "That is enough," she thundered. "Mr. Hayes, you are in contempt of court." She looked at the evidence, at the broken man screaming at the plaintiff's table, and at the calm, dignified woman he had terrorized. The decision was not difficult. "In the matter of Hayes versus Hayes," she announced, her voice ringing with finality, "I am ruling entirely in favor of the defendant, Ms. Caily Hayes. The divorce is granted effective immediately on the grounds of extreme cruelty and fraud. All marital assets, including the full title to the marital home and all known investment accounts, are awarded to Ms. Hayes. All debts secretly incurred by Mr. Hayes are his sole responsibility. The temporary restraining order is now a permanent one. Mr. Hayes, you will never contact or approach your now ex-wife again." She paused, looking down at Issac, who had collapsed into his chair, a broken man. "Furthermore," she said, her voice dropping, "given the overwhelming evidence of felony fraud, identity theft, and perjury presented here today, I am ordering the court clerk to deliver a copy of this entire transcript and all evidence to the district attorney's office, along with my strongest recommendation for a criminal investigation. Mr. Hayes, you are a disgrace to this court. We are adjourned." As the judge swept from the room, a stunned silence fell, soon broken by the frantic scribbling and typing of the press. It was over. The lie, the performance, the man himself, all had been utterly and publicly dismantled. Caily took a deep, shaky breath, the first truly free breath she had taken in years, and leaned into the solid, unwavering presence of the man beside her. Justice had been served. The story of Caily and Issac is more than just a shocking courtroom drama. It's a powerful testament to the quiet, enduring strength of the human spirit. It's a story of resilience against the silent, creeping poison of emotional abuse and the breathtaking audacity of greed. Caily's journey from a controlled, fearful wife to a strong, independent woman who reclaimed her voice reminds us that it is never too late to escape the darkness and fight for the truth. It serves as a chilling warning about the charming facades that can hide the most monstrous of intentions. The courtroom may have been the stage for the final act, but the real victory was won the moment Caily decided to choose herself, her freedom, and the future of her unborn child over the fear that had imprisoned her for so long. If this story moved you and you believe in the power of truth to overcome deceit, please take a moment to hit that like button to help us share this incredible story of survival. Share this video with someone who might need to hear a message of hope and courage. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into real-life dramas that matter. We want to hear from you what part of Caily's story resonated with you the most. Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.